You're still able to breathe, though. Good. I was concerned about that. So the interesting thing about delta is that it is possible in some very advanced meditators to be able to be alert in delta. And waking delta, again, I learned this from Dr. Hart, waking delta is very strongly associated with what is called kundalini energy, which is the energy that the mystics talk about being at the base of the spine, dormant at the base of the spine, and then as you do your meditation practice, it awakens this energy and it moves up the spine through the different chakras, awakening each of these chakras or spiritual centers until finally it gets up to the brain where illumination happens. So this kundalini energy also has a lot to do with a person's ability to manifest things in the world, to control and create their own reality in a conscious way. Everybody is creating their own reality, but most people, the creative part is running on autopilot. That's a big goal for this retreat, is to help you begin the process of taking it off autopilot so that you can be doing it consciously and intentionally. So when I went to Dr. Hart's brainwave training, I was supposed to be sitting there making alpha waves. But on I think the 5th of the 7 days, I suddenly had these long periods of time where I started making very high amplitude waking delta. And so when I came out of this chamber that each person is in individually to do this, he said, "Do you ever have times where you make a lot of kundalini energy?" And I said, "Well, I have," and he took me over and showed me these polygraph tracings and showed me that I was being a bad boy. I wasn't making alpha like I was supposed to. I was making all these waking delta waves. And then he told me that he had seen this in a few people in the 30 years that he had been doing this, and that he had found that people that can do this seem to be able to create anything they want in the world. They seem to be pretty unstoppable, and whatever they decide that they want to do or create, they seem to be able to do it pretty effortlessly, which has been my experience over the last 6, 7, 8 years at least. I've been able to do it for longer than that, I suppose, but the ability has grown in the last several years. Well, then, as many of you know, I sent something out to most Centerpoint people by email telling them about Dr. Hart and BioCybernaut. And as a result of that, tons of Centerpoint people have gone down to take his trainings. And he has, in fact, the whole rest of this year, his trainings are almost all Centerpoint people. And so he's done 3 or 4 trainings, I guess, 3, 4, 5, I'm not sure how many trainings since I sent that out, that were full of Centerpoint people. And he noticed that the Centerpoint people who had been using holosync for a while, I mean, there were some that would go there and they'd been using it for a few months or something, but the ones that had been using it for a few years, that had really been very disciplined about using it and had used it every day and so on, those people, he found that almost all of them had some periods of time where they were making mystical theta and waking delta, and that it was way too much of it to be coincidental, that suddenly after 30 years of rarely seeing this, that he was seeing this in people who had used holosync. So in case you're looking for some motivation to use this, one of the things that develops over time is your ability to awaken this kundalini energy and to be able to manifest in the world the things that you want to manifest. This also carries a certain responsibility, because he said that if people gain this ability, he had met one person in his training that had this ability that fell into this category. If you gain this ability, but you haven't handled your unresolved stuff, and you still have a lot of anger or some other sort of dark side emotion, you could turn out to be Darth Vader. You could turn out to be somebody that has a lot of power, but no moral compass, really, to help you decide how to use it. So I just sort of tell that as an aside because it was really a kind of a revelation to me. So anyway, you have these 4 brainwave patterns, and recently then some scientists, as you may know from things I've sent to you, studied some Tibetan Buddhist monks who had been using this compassion meditation that the Buddhists have for anywhere from, I think it was 24 to 50 years. And when they measured their brain waves, they were mostly making alpha, but every once in a while they'd have this huge spike of what are called gamma waves, which are even more high frequency than beta. But for some reason, the progression of becoming more separate as the brain waves become higher doesn't apply to gamma, because these people felt super, super connected to everyone, and in fact they felt so much compassion for other people that they had this urge to help everyone. And particularly in Buddhism, one of the things that they talk about a lot is the development of compassion, this feeling of loving kindness for all beings. And so you can add those gamma waves as a 5th brainwave pattern, and gamma is usually described as being from 25 to 40 cycles per second. So putting gamma aside for now, because it just sort of doesn't follow the pattern of the rest of them, one of the things I talk about a lot is the idea of brain synchronization, that when you meditate, the 2 sides of the brain synchronize or balance. And this corresponds to these brain waves that I've been talking about. When you are in a beta brainwave pattern, particularly in the higher range of it, you feel very separate, and the 2 hemispheres of the brain are very separate. They are not communicating with each other very much, and generally one or the other hemisphere is very dominant over the other. If it's the left hemisphere that's dominant over the other, you will be a very objective type of person. You will be very, I mean, everybody's heard the term, he's very left brain or she's very left brain. Your attention is very objectively focused. You're focused on the outer world. Whereas if the right side of the brain is dominant, then you're very subjectively focused and very focused on the interior. If the brain is balanced, of course, then there's a balance between those 2 things. So in beta, your brain is very lateralized, one or the other hemisphere is very dominant, and you feel a lot of feelings of separation. And the symptoms of separation are fear, anxiety, depression, things like substance abuse, because you feel that, dis-ease, feeling disconnected from yourself, feeling disconnected from others, those sorts of things. Then as the brain waves begin to slow down, the 2 sides of the brain begin to communicate with each other more. And the more that communication happens, the more that balance happens, the more you feel good, the more you feel connected. And when the brain finally can access these very slow waking delta waves, you feel totally connected to everything. Now that is such a powerful experience that most of the time when you have it, first of all, recognize that you pretty much have to have this experience every day of spending some time in delta. If you don't go and have dreamless sleep at least once a day, you start to feel really lousy. There's a certain renewal that happens when you go back to that source, so to speak. And there's certain physiological things that happen, certain hormones that are created, certain catalysts in the brain, certain neurochemicals, and so on. But it's such an intense experience for most people that you have to be unconscious to have it. The very advanced yogi can have this experience without being unconscious because he's gone through a purification process where his nervous system has been purified to the point that it can handle this incredible amount of energy. And I'll touch on that in a little bit too.